Welcome to VolleyTalk. Alongside me here, Austin, I'm Elliot Skelly. Joining us today, the head coach of the St. Xavier Bombers and reigning D1 State Coach of the Year, Bill Ferris. Coach, how you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to have you on. So, hey, you look at historically in the state of Ohio, the GCL, you, Elder, and Moeller have been consistently at the top, won most state championships proportionally. What do you think that you guys do to field excellent teams consistently year over year?
Well, I think it's a combination of the players that we get in the program, especially by the time they become seniors. They're such leaders. They've got good experience. Couple that with the competition we play week in and week out in our league. Like you said, some of the best teams and some of the best players have come through Cincinnati, and particularly the GCL. And you can't fake that kind of experience or that kind of pressure or that kind of competition, even in a practice or even with some occasional good matches throughout the year. We get it week in, week out. It really battle hardens our guys and especially the seniors. So that's really what's been the benefit from my perspective.
For sure. Coach, let's take a look at your history in the sport, your history with St. X as well. You've been coaching the Bombers before I was even born. You've amassed over 400 wins. How has the landscape of the sport changed over time in your eyes?
Well, even going back before you were born here, I was on the very first team that St. X started back in 1994. So we are celebrating our 30th anniversary. I was a junior when we started a club program at St. X, and then the school allowed us to put on some soccer uniforms that said St. Xavier and play 1994 season against Elder was there with us. And the sport was a little more advanced north of Cincinnati at that time. And we've just seen it steadily grow over the years from those humble beginnings to what we see now. Honestly, I think the last couple of years with the movement in the OHSAA recognition of the sport has been incredible for getting more teams on board. And we have very quickly seen that with more teams, we see more and more better players throughout the state. I have loved that development. I love the competition coming out of Columbus. I love seeing the good Dayton schools and the great players that are coming from North, Central, South, and East.
Yeah, I can't agree more. It's been really cool seeing all the growth.
Hmm.
So you look at the past few years, outside of Moeller, you're the most recent team to win a state championship. That being said, you haven't been back to the state tournament. You've had three straight five-set losses in the regional
Hmm.
final.
I
So nobody
recall.
in your yeah, I'm sure you do. Nobody in your program's been to state tournament in a while. Is there a hunger for this team this year to break through and get to state tournament and go beyond?
Yes, absolutely. We know how close we've been these last couple of years. We know it's, a play here or there, a call here or there. Um, Good luck on one side, bad luck on the other. It's when you get to those levels and when you get to that match and you have it that close throughout, it's just good players making good plays throughout, and one or two here or there can swing, the result. We're chasing greatness. It hurts sometimes that very good seasons don't feel as good as they should because the boys put in a ton of work, compete at a high level, and when that reward's not quite there, it hurts, but it doesn't undermine the effort, the memories, the skill, and the fun that we've had throughout.
For sure. You and I have talked about just getting this sport sanctioned by the
Hmm.
OHSA. What's your opinion on the regional alignment and the tournament format set by the organization?
Well, I mean, I understand what they're doing in terms of trying to align it as closely as they can to the girls' side of the sport. Obviously, I always enjoyed the opportunity to play a league rival in a state championship if we can both get there. I loved the theory that more players were getting to play in that last weekend when Division One sent a Final Eight to state instead of a Final Four. I really enjoyed that. I thought it helped ensure that the best teams were going to be competing for that state championship. There have been a handful of years where it feels like maybe someone's regional final could actually be the state championship game. That hasn't been the case in the last year or two. Obviously, teams like Liberty are doing a great job of um, representing their area and the state in general, getting all the way through to the end. Um, but I like the opportunity to have more kids upstate give a second team from a good region a chance at state, and ensuring that the best matchup is happening in the state finals. But I understand what the state's doing as well in terms of standardizing, aligning, and kind of keeping that Final Four aspect to it.
It is a tough balance to strike. So speaking of Liberty, you were able to recently head down to Columbus and play at Liberty for the quad match with them, Berlin and Brecksville.
Mm-hmm.
We've had Liberty at 1 or 2 this whole year.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a sense when you play them that maybe this is a preview of a state championship matchup to come?
Well, I certainly hope from our perspective it is. Means we've gotten through the Elders, the Molars, and all the teams down this way and through the GCL. So from that aspect, I hope so. Last couple years, I feel like we've done a really nice job of scheduling pretty tough matches throughout the season. And we knew for the last couple of years that a team like Liberty, Brecksville has been building each year. Berlin has been competitive year in, year out. So we felt like it was a good opportunity for us, whether it's an actual state, looking forward to a state finals wasn't as important to me as knowing that they've got an excellent team with excellent players that would challenge us and give us an opportunity to, kind of get tested, see what we need to do to improve, and hopefully put some plays on film that can help us down the road if we need it.
Yeah.
Yep. You started the year 7-0. Impressive, and it's over great competition, and again, #1 in the state for Elliot and I. But that being said, you've only won straight sets once, which was this past Friday against LaSalle. Is there any talk amongst you and the coaches as to why this is happening?
No, not at this point in the season. The hardest part of getting any season off the ground is figuring out what's going on early in the season. We don't shoot for undefeated after a week or after a month or anything like that. We work hard in practice. We put together a lineup we believe is going to be competitive, and then we evaluate. We're not right all the time. We don't, the players aren't playing the way we expect all the time. All that factors into it. So nothing about our start is anything more than just us trying to figure things out, playing as well as we can. We don't get too high or too low at this point in the season. So no, we don't really look at it too much that way. It's all just part of the process to get us to some big important games in mid and late May.
So yeah, I hear you. And I know, the coach talk like, hey, it doesn't really matter except for the state championship, right? But you guys were pretty dang close to going undefeated last year. Had one 5-set loss late in season to Elder. Is there any, does it cross your mind at all as part of the team goals? Like, maybe it'd be cool to just go 22-0 in the regular season.
No, I haven't brought that up at all, and I haven't heard it from any of the guys either. I don't say it as a cliche. Like, there's no point in looking ahead. Moeller has the last couple of years caught us at the very end, and doesn't matter if that's our first loss or our 10th loss. A loss there hurts, and we want to get past that, whether we've got 0 losses on the season or 5 or 10 or 15 losses on the season. I can't emphasize enough. It really doesn't matter to us that might be a feather in the cap at the end of the year, but the awards and the milestones and those kinds of things, to me, all take a backseat to having a chance and hopefully overcoming and winning a state championship.
It's a mature perspective for sure. So while you look ahead, this week you've got a home match against Roger Bacon. In just a few weeks, you got the Centerville Elite 8 tournament coming up. Some GCL matches in between. What are you hoping to see from your team in this midseason stretch here?
Well, continued development, of course. We look, more consistency in our service game. I think that's a real asset for us. We've got a pretty solid serve receive and obviously a great setter in Aiden Berkemeyer that can distribute balls all around the court. I think our offense has been continuously improving. So we're getting to a point in this season where we need to see a little bit of refinement there in all areas of the game. And it's sort of getting to a point where we get a nice little rest. We take a few days off for Easter. The boys have been through a lot. Like I said, we've jumped out the gate with some good competition. I'd like to see a few more players get some playing time on the court these next couple of matches if we can. Like to see everybody get fully healthy to the extent they need to. We've been blessed in that regard so far. We haven't had anything that's really nagging, but you get mid-season and it's kind of your time to start thinking about was playing a little bit long-term end of the year so that we're trying to hit on all cylinders come the postseason.
Well, Coach, we appreciate your time. Obviously, you guys are gearing up for a great season. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you having us. Appreciate what you're doing for the sport.
All right, that was Bill Ferris. Great to get him on. Obviously, St. X, your alma mater, and great volleyball school this year and every year. So looking at some of the stuff that happened this week, we saw St. X beat LaSalle in 3, picking up their first straight set win. They also got Roger Bacon since we talked to him, another straight set win. Big one I thought was Moeller over Elder in 4. Saw a lot of good things from Moeller. Honestly, I was pretty impressed with how Elder played too. Obviously, they were 6-0 before that. So still a very solid team. Probably not as good as, they were in 2021 or 2022, but still a good side from Elder this year. What were some things you noticed from that Moeller Elder match?
Yeah, I think for me, it was just the fact that Elder really tormented Moeller at times. And I think at times, Elder was able to really play a good game because of their fans, right? It's hard to play in a game, or rather, it's hard to play in an atmosphere like Elder's wrestling and volleyball gymnasium, where you have the fans almost stacked right on top of you and they're screaming, they're cheering for their team. And that's what really has willed the Panthers to a lot of these key results at home. And again, I feel like Mueller has that resilience, right? We saw it under Lee Meyer where sometimes they wouldn't get the best results in regular season, but they're fighting, they're in it. And it really comes to fruition in May. But this seems like the type of result that helps Mueller, especially after that loss to St. X. You get Casey Piper, a GCL win. It's a lot to be proud of for Mueller.
His first in his career, very impressive to start it off. There's one thing I want to touch on, and that was Tierney was doing some benching of his son Tommy Tierney, I believe a couple other players at times throughout the match. I don't really fully understand that because I think Tommy Tierney, if not their best, one of their best players. And I don't know. I do wonder if like the father-son dynamic gets into it, I mean, like you want to be harder on your own kid. I think we see that sometimes. I don't know. I never really understood that. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know. It just seemed a little off at times, right? And again, we were watching this game and there was just some calls that weren't going Elder's way. There was a serve that was inbounds, the ref called it out of bounds,
Yeah,
and
it was rough.
we even said it, we're like, that's got to be maybe 1 or 2 feet in. And Elder's fans and the support was just livid. And there were a lot of different calls that way, but in that type of moment, you just have to look at the next ball. You have to look at the next point and you have to go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said in my comment last week about how Liberty and Sanics are way up here, I think that was proven last night. I don't think, I mean, I think Sanics could probably go 6-0 in the GCL. Obviously, I thought that last year, and then Elder knocked him off at the end. But I think this is probably their year to be 6-0 outright GCL champions. And then we get to Saturday, and St. Charles had a great day at a quad. They beat all D1 teams. Jackson in 4, beat Mount Vernon in 3, which was the big result, and St. Ed's in 3. Really, really impressive wins for the Cardinals.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like after that quad, I feel like the first set against Jackson, they were just getting settled in, and then they started to get into more of a rhythm. And the biggest thing for me was you're going from Jackson to a top 10 team in D1 with Mount Vernon, and they just took that rhythm and took it to the next level against the Yellow Jackets. And again, that third set was what, like 25-11 in favor of
Yeah.
St. Charles, something like that. And that was the type of power they were showing. They were just indomitable by the time their quad at St. Ed's ended.
Yes, and their only loss so far is a loss in 4 to D1 number 1 St. X. Obviously, not someone they're going to have to worry about come playoff time. Now, interestingly, on the flip side, the team we had number 1 last week, which is Archbishop McNicholas, they took a loss to Lakota East. Now, Lakota East, I think, is probably a team that's been creeping outside of our top 10, hasn't yet graced it, but still, I mean, I think in a best of 3 match, Lakota East won in 3. So McNick takes its first loss of the season. St. Charles with 3 impressive wins. I don't know. I think in both of our rankings, that is enough to move St. Charles up over McNick.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Again, we don't know how good Lakota East is. In my opinion, I think they can contend to get the GMC title. But again, looking at their schedule, they've got a lot of high-end D2 teams, a few good D1 teams, but you're not testing the Molars, the Elders, the St. X's. So obviously, we don't get the feel that we saw from Sycamore last year with a team led by Owen Walsh, and at the very least could compete against those two teams. But nonetheless, I think the Thunderhawks are a pretty solid team, and they've got a lot to be proud of because, in my opinion, this is a McNick team that can return to the Final Four.
We also saw Bishop Fenwick take down Beaver Creek in 4. Now, I mean, obviously, we know Fenwick's talented. They took Elder to a loss in 4, and they've had some great wins in D2. But I think this more says like Beaver Creek. This probably isn't Beaver Creek's year in D1, just from what we've seen so far.
Yeah, and I think Fenwick as well is just getting back to the rhythm. You have to understand that the Falcons have a few of their players that returned from last year that, they were the #1 seed before they got reverse swept at home by Baden, but that was a solid team that could have gone the distance. And again, I feel like Fenwick is another one of those quality teams that can make a run overall. And on your point is, I just feel like there's a lot of these conferences, I just talked about the GMC and Lakota East. GWalk's kind of the same way, right? Beaver Creek tends to still hold that crown over Centerville. Wayne doesn't have the firepower to really charge for the crown. And yet, when this team takes on squads in the region or squads that are close to them, we just don't know how good they are, right? We're starting to see
Yeah.
some conferences get better than others. And again, we might have a good test on Friday when Beaver Creek goes to Darby, and let's see how they do there. But again, I don't know how good the Beavers will be this year.
Yeah, and I know it's really interesting how good we're seeing like the top end D2 teams consistently beating almost all of the Division 1 teams except for the very elite layer. So I don't know, really impressive stuff we're seeing at the Division 2 level. You mentioned Darby. We talked about Darby and Jerome both swept Olentangy in OCC Cardinal play. Now, at the beginning of the year, I was maybe thinking Olentangy could break into the top 10. I'm probably not thinking that anymore. Based on what I've seen in the OCC Cardinal, we're probably going to see Darby, Berlin, and Thomas Warrington as the main contenders who have a shot at winning it. Thomas swept Jerome in 4. Now, we're still the top 2 teams in the region being Thomas and Darby because Berlin's not in the same region. Tom's still missing JT McGuire, who's their big outside hitter. Darby's still missing Chris Jones, who's their big outside hitter. Darby beat Thomas in 5. So it's kind of like without their best guy, Darby's the better team in 5. But I think that those are the 2 teams that have the best chance to come out of the region, knowing what we know about the Dayton teams in Beaver Creek.
Yeah, and I think so too. And we're going to get a good dose of that on April 4th, I believe. That's when Darby plays Berlin. The game will be at Berlin's place, the Bears Den. And again, it just feels like it's just this big muddle, right? We don't know who's going to step out. And we talked about it last year where it was teed up for some time, but it was really Darby, Jerome, and Berlin in that mix.
Yep.
And Jerome didn't take that crown. They were in the tournament as a lesser seed, but they were able to pull up the upsets when it mattered most and get to the Final Four. So again, this is a long stretch process, but I think it's interesting to see how this region has started to develop, and I want to see how the Bears do in a big competition at home against Darby.
Those are the 2 undefeated teams right now. So obviously that'd be huge for the conference standings. Looking at our Division 1 rankings, not a whole lot changed. The main thing I did come around, I think, on St. Ignatius over Brexville Broadview Heights. We talked about St. Edward when Brexville Broadview Heights played them. I wasn't super impressed with the win. It was a sweep, but the scores were all pretty close. St. Ignatius played St. Ed's this week. I believe it was 15-7, 15. And I texted you, I was like, whoa, like, especially the 7. Like that's St. Ed's is not a bad team. So for St. Ignatius to still be undefeated, no sets dropped, I think that's enough to push them up to 4. Really going to be interesting to see how they do against St. X.
Yeah, I agree. I put Brexville over St. Iggy's last week, but I think the biggest thing was what we're starting to see from the Wildcats is what we saw from the Explorers last season, where they can go into any situation and get the win where it matters, right? And in some of these cases where they're playing teams that are not as good as them, it's about sweeping. And I think that's the scary part about the Wildcats this year is they're more potent, right? And I think the bigger thing is from a bigger picture is that for a long time, they were the Kings in that Northeast region. And then along comes Hudson out of nowhere last year, and Ignatius struggles with injuries. But now you've got a bigger roster. Now you've got Jack Reagan, who's now a sophomore. He's got a year of varsity under his belt. That's a team that can really cause some damage. And I think what we saw against St. Ed's shows that the Wildcats can be the #1 team in Region 2.
Time will tell, my friend. Time will tell. So and then I liked how Utter played, so I moved him up over Darby and Mount Vernon, and then just Mount Vernon losing in the fashion they did to St. Charles. I still think they're a top 10 team, but I don't know. They're gonna have to prove it to me if they're gonna come back up any higher.
Yeah, I agree. And again, you can take that result from 2 ways. You can say St. Charles played really well, or Mount Vernon crumbled towards the end of the game. And it's kind of what you said earlier. Time will tell what's the true result of that match.
Division two, only thing that changed. Both of us put St. Charles from the 2 spot to the 1 spot. I think we covered that plenty. St. Charles obviously on fire. McNicholas still, I mean, still in a great spot. Let's be real. They still are dominating teams like Baden. But it's gonna come down to that match against St. Charles to determine who's gonna take the number 1 spot for a while. All right, another great week of Ohio volleyball. Mahir, any final thoughts?
A lot of interesting games coming down the final stretch. As we're talking about it next week, we're gonna have a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I'm excited for the Elite Eight. It's a couple weeks ahead. I'm hoping I might be able to make it down to Centerville for that one. We'll see. I might have a test, so I don't know. We'll see how college goes. But anyway, this has been Ohio Volley Talk. Thanks so much for watching. We will catch you next week.